Okay, good day, everyone. Um, my name is Ifai, and today our guest speaker is Thomas. So we're going to be looking at Power BI parameter. So the Power BI learning community is being brought to you by UrBizEdge and being sponsored by Enterprise DNA. Enterprise DNA is a Power BI focused organization, and their goal is to empower Power BI users to change the world. So they have free online courses. They also have accelerator programs. They also have give out certificates if you take one of their programs. And they also have Power BI challenges and events and showcase. And they also have a forum as well. Then your business is a registered Microsoft consultancy, financial modeling, business intelligence, data analyst, and business and enterprise solution firm in Nigeria. They specialize in helping organizations and high value performers bring on top of their business data. They're also developers of the Nigeria Financial Markets tool, which is available on your Microsoft Office store, which you should check out. And also, again, the brains behind the Nigerian markets data. So, your business have offer physical classes and also online classes, and which I will share the links in the comment section. So today our guest speaker is Thomas, and Thomas is a Microsoft MVP. He's a Microsoft certified Power BI analyst and a Google certified data analyst. To say a chartered accountant and a chartered global management accountant with professional qualifications, and also the founder and the lead trainer at First Man Learning Hub. And he has trained over 1,500 professionals in data analytics and financial modeling and model Excel and Power BI. He's so passionate about technology and loves sharing his experience with others. Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
Hello. So you could take over.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity. I also wanted to thank Michael and then yourself and the other members of your team who are putting this together and also giving us the platform to also share our knowledge with the data community. So I'm really happy to be here today. So as rightly introduced, today's section is going to be on Power BI parameters. So I'm going to look at how we can use Power BI parameters to improve our Power BI experience, both for ourselves and then our users. And that's what we are going to discuss today.
Hello. Oh, Thomas, are you still there? Hello. Don't know what's gone. Oh, I think
Yes, I'm
it's
sharing my screen.
okay. I thought we lost you for a moment.
So good evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining the section from. So this section is going to be on Power Query parameters. So I'm going to look at what parameters are and the types of parameters that we have in Power BI and how we can implement them to improve our user experience. So when you talk about Power BI parameters, these are features that helps you to define multiple scenarios under which you want to evaluate your Power BI queries, your data models, or your Power BI reports. Now in Power BI, you can create parameters in two ways. You can have query parameters or you can have report parameters. So when you are using parameters, it gives you the flexibility to dynamically change the output of your queries, depending on their values. And there are two ways that you can actually use Power Query parameters. So you're going to start with the query parameters, and then we are going to look at report parameters. So when you are using Power Query or query parameters, you are looking at how you'll be able to modify the data at the source. So here you can use Power Query parameters as an argument for your data transformation. You can also use query parameters when you want to define custom functions within Power Query. So I'm going to start with the Power Query parameters or the query parameters. So what I'm going to do is to go to Power Query, because that's where we are going to set up the parameter. So within my home tab, I have already imported this data. So I'm going to drive you back to Power Query, and we are going to look at how we'll be able to apply parameters to the data before the data will be loaded into Power BI. And that's what we do most of the time. We apply query parameters at the source of the data before the data will be loaded. So I'm going to look at two ways that we can use query parameters within Power BI. So I'm going to click on transform data to go to, sorry. So I'm going to click on transform data to go to Power Query, and we are going to look at how we can apply the query parameter. Let me make sure you are seeing my screen. Can you see my Power Query screen, or is it still on the Power
No,
BI?
it's still on Power BI. So I think
Okay,
you're
sure.
share screen.
Okay, so now within this query, I have this sales report. Now here we have order date, then the year, the month name, customer name, we have city, we have state, we have customer type, we have account manager, and we have other priority. Then we also have the name of the product category, the product container, the ship mode, the unit price, profit margin, order quantity, and then total revenue. So this relates to a company that receives orders from customers and is going to deliver those orders to them. So here we have the date of the order, the month, the year, and the customer who ordered for the product, the city, the state, and the customer type. Now within this data, maybe you want to analyze this data based on specific customer type. Now, one of the best practices for data modeling is that you need to only import the data that you really need for your analysis. So maybe with this data analytics project that we are undertaking, our goal is to analyze the sales for specific customer group. So because of this, we don't need to import all the data. Our focus is just look at specific customer at every point in time. We can import the entire data into Power BI if the data size is not huge. But in cases where you have a huge data size, but your focus of the analysis is look at specific thing. So in this scenario, we are picking customer type as a specific item that we are interested in. This could have been anything. Maybe it could be geographical. Maybe you want to analyze the data relating to specific geographical area. But you have data for all the geography, like all the areas that the company operates, which are not the focus of the analysis that you want to perform. So here you want to minimize the data that we import into Power BI because of performance issues and then the data storage issues. So here we want to limit the data that we import into Power BI. So here we can apply parameter, which is going to define the kind of data or the type of data that we can import into Power BI. So here, what I'm going to do is to create a list with the customer type that we have. So I'm going to duplicate this query. And what I'm going to do is to just select the customer type column. And I'm going to move all the other columns. I don't need them for the query that I'm going to create. I just want to create query for the customer type. So I'm going to right click and then remove other columns. So I'm left with just this customer type column. Now what I'm going to do is to get the distinct values. I'm not interested in the whole list. I just want the unique values. So each of them is going to represent the type of customer that we have. So I'm going to pick remove duplicate. So it means that we have 4 different type of customers. Now, based on the analysis that we want to do, our focus is to look at a single customer. So it could be corporate customers, it could be small business, or it could be home office, or maybe consumer. So here, I have this list here. I'm going to rename this query. I'm going to call this list, or maybe customer type. It could be anything. Now, what I'm going to do is to convert this into a list. So I'll go to transform, and we have this option here, convert to list. So I'm going to convert this into a list. So I have this list here. Now, the next thing is to create the query, which is going to make use of this list query that we have here. So on the home tab, we have manage queries. This way we'll be able to create and manage all our queries or parameters. So I'll go to manage parameters and then click on new parameter. So here we are going to create a new parameter based on the list that we have here. So I'm going to click on create new parameter. And we need to give the name to the parameter. So I'm going to call this customer type. And if you need to provide any description. Hello?
So this stuff is not showing. I think they pop up.
Okay. Okay, let me cancel this.
They pop up anyway.
Is it okay now?
I think so, but if you go back to the Power Query and you go back to where you are, maybe we'll check. But I think it will, since you're sharing your entire screen now.
Okay, screen. Is it showing now?
Okay. Where you did the right click and the
okay.
parameter.
So let me remove. Okay. So now we are here.
Okay.
Is it okay now, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So now here, what we want to do is to create a parameter using the customer type as the list. So what I'm going to do is to right click and duplicate this query. Now, what I'm interested in is the customer types. So here you could have entered it directly by using this option, but I don't want to enter this. So I'm just going to maintain just this column and remove the duplicate. So I will be able to get the individual customer types that we have. So I'm going to select this column, right click and remove all the other columns. So I'll be left with this, but I'm not interested in the entire list that we have here. I'm interested in the individual customer types. So here, what I'm going to do is to right click and then pick remove duplicate. So, is it okay, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So now I have the list here. So if you take a look at this, you see that we have 4 main types of customers. So here, what we want to do is to limit the data that we import into Power BI based on the customer type. We don't want to import everything because of performance issues and maybe the size of the data. So we want to limit the kind of data or the amount of data that we load into Power BI based on the customer type. So the project that we are undertaking with this data analytics project that we want to undertake is going to be based on single customer. We don't want to put everything together. So we want to analyze it based on the customer type. So I'm going to create a list here. Now what I'm going to do is to rename the query. So I'll call this list, or maybe customer list. I have this list here. So I have the list here. So what I will do is to go to transform and convert this into a list. So I'll go to transform and we have this option to convert this into a list. So I'm going to pick convert to list. Now this is a list. Now I'm going to make a query. I'm going to create a Now I'm going to create a parameter which is going to make use of this list as the source. So what I will do is to go to the Home tab and then go to Manage Parameters. So this is where you'll be able to create and manage all your parameters. So I'll click on the drop down and pick New Parameter. If you already have a parameter, that's where you'll be able to manage the parameter. So maybe you want to edit or change something here. That's where you'll be able to do it. Now we are just creating our first parameter. So I'm going to click on New Parameter. And here we need to provide the name of the parameter. So I'm going to call this customer type. And then if you need to provide any description, you can also provide description for the parameter. So for now, I'm going to leave this as it is. And then we come to type. So here we are creating a list. So here I'm going to pick text. And then the suggested values is going to be list of values. So I'm going to pick list. And here you can type the list manually, just like what we have here. So consumer, corporate, home office, or small business, you can type the list here. If you already have a query which has the list, then you can pick query. So in this case, we already have a query which has the list that we want to use. So I'm going to pick query and then click on the drop down to select the query. So now we have the customer list. And that's what we want to use as the source for the parameter that we want to create. So I'm going to pick this. And here you can provide the current value. So here maybe I want to use consumer. And then click OK. So now we have created the parameter. So if you take a look at this, you see that the current value is consumer. Now I'll go to the report here. Now what I'm going to do is to duplicate this query. And here, let's maintain the 2. So now we have this data here. So currently the query is not taking any effect. Now what we can do here is to come to the customer type. And I'm going to click on the drop down. And here you see that all the customer types are here. Now I'm going to apply text filter to this column. So I'll go to text filters and I'm going to pick equals. Now within this window, we can type any specific customer type. So if you want to look at maybe home office, we can type home office here. And this is going to filter this column and show us only home office. So here we have this option where you can type the text directly, or you can make use of a parameter that you have. Or even if you don't have the parameter set up, you can create new one from this window here. So here, because we have already set up the parameter, I'm going to pick parameter here. And now you can see that by default, because we only have one parameter, this has been selected. But if you had multiple parameters, then we can click on the drop down and select the specific parameter that we want to use. So here we just have one parameter and this has been selected for us. So now when I click OK, you see that now the data has been filtered based on the current value of the parameter. So now when I go to report 2, you see that here we just have consumer. We don't have any other customer type. So what it means is that now when we click on close and apply and we go to Power BI, it's only this data which is going to be loaded. So now let's go back. So I'm going to click on close and apply and we are going to see the effect of this. So here within this window, instead of consumer, I can make it home office. And now when I come to this report, you see that home office is the one which we are using now. So it means that the data has been filtered to home office. And that's what we have here. If I go back and change it to maybe corporate, then I come back, you see now it's showing corporate. Now let's go back to Power BI and then let's see the effect of this. So I'll hit on close and apply. So now let's come here. So I'm going to create a report here. So we are going to have account manager, and then I'm going to pick a matrix. So here for account managers, I want to see their total orders for each of the years. So I'm going to have this here. And I'm going to expand this. Or maybe let me bring the year up. So each of the years, and then we have the account managers. So I'm going to bring in the total sales. So now we have their total sales here. Now I'm going to bring in the customer type here. So we are using the main source data. Now this is where we have the query applied. This is where we have the parameter applied. So let me remove everything here. So I'm going to keep my metrics here. So I'll go to sales report 2. So here we are going to pick the year or the year, and I'm going to bring in account managers. So I'm going to expand this or draw down to this. And now we have this total revenue. So let's quickly keep a measure in this table, which is going to calculate the total revenue or the total sales. So because I already have a field with this name, let me make it this way. So this is just going to be a sum of the total revenue column in the source report 2 data. So you have this total revenue. So that's what we want to sum. And I'm going to format this. And now I'm going to use this on this report. So I'm going to bring in the value here. So we have this here. Now what I'm going to do is to bring in customer type here. Now if you take a look at this customer type, you can see that this is corporate because in the parameter within Power Query, we have already set the current value to corporate. Now within this window, if you also want to change the parameter, you can also change it from here. So here maybe you have done the analysis. Now you want to switch to a different customer type. Now here within transform data, when you click on the drop down, we have edit parameters. So I'm going to click on this. And now you see that we have the customer type parameter. And now the current value is corporate. Maybe I want to change this to a different customer type. I can just click on this. And maybe this time I'm picking home office. So now I click OK. And then I apply the changes. This will go to the source and filter the data and bring in the parameter or the item that we have selected here. So now I click apply changes. Now this is going to refresh my query. And now if you take a look at this result, you can see that the result here has changed. And now if you take a look at the customer type that we have here, it's home office. So it means that the values that you are seeing here relate to home office customers only. Now when I go to transform, edit queries or edit parameters, I can change this to small business and then click OK. Now you see that the values here, when you hit apply changes, the values here are going to change. And now we have different values based on the parameter that we have selected. So this is one of the ways that you can use query parameters. This is one of the ways that you can use query parameters in order to restrict or monitor or control the amount of data that you import into Power BI. Now let's take another example. So I'm going to Power Query, transform query. And now within this window, we are going to import another data. So here we are looking at how we can use parameters to create custom functions that will be able to automate some of your processes within Power Query. So with your data transformation, you can also create custom functions that is going to help you to save those steps as a function, which you can then apply on your data to transform your data. So here, what I'm going to do, let me close this. I'm going to create a blank Power BI report. So I'll go to File, and then I'll click on New. So now we are inside new Power Query. Now we are inside a new Power BI report. So here I'm going to get new data. So here we are going to work with data which is in the folder. So you have CSV files which are in the folder. So I'm going to look at how we can use parameters to create custom functions, which is going to help us to automate our data transformation process within Power Query. So here I'll go to Get Data, and I'll go to More. And here, within the options that we have here, I'm going to pick folder and click connect. So I'm going to paste. I have already copied the file path or the folder path. So I'm just going to paste it here. And I'm going to pick or click on OK. And now these are the CSV files that I have within the folder. So here I have an option where I can combine all the CSV files as one, but I'm going to show you how you'll be able to transform your data and save it as a custom function, and you can apply it on all the CSV files. So here I'm going to pick transform data. So here I'm going to rename the query. So I'm going to call this sales, or maybe sales transactions. I have this here. Now what I'm going to do here is to click on one of these. So you can see that each of the CSV file, we have the content here, which is stored as binary. Then we have the name, the extension, and other information relating to each of the files. So what I'm going to do is to right click on one of the binaries and click on add as new query. So I have this here. Now what I'm going to do is to rename this. So I'm going to call this maybe source 2. Now what I'm going to do here is to go to the formula bar. So you see that the formula bar here, we are using record and file access navigation. So if you take a look at this, it's using January CSV. So this time we want to pick the first file. So I'm going to change this to index. So I'm going to make it 0. So index 0 means we are picking the first row within the data or within the content that we have in the sales transaction. So I'm going to hit enter. And now you can take, if you take a look at this, this is January. Now let me remove all the steps. And here, if I change this to 1, it's going to give us the CSV file for February. So I'm going to remove this step as well. So we have this here. Now with this, we can create a parameter around this. So here you can select this and then right click. But when you come here, you see that the option to convert this into a parameter is deactivated. So now what we need to do is to create a parameter ourselves using this as the binary query. So what I would do is to go to the Home tab, and I'll go to Parameter or Manage Parameter. I'm going to click on the drop down and pick New Parameter. So here I'm going to call this Source Transformation or Transform. Here you can provide a description. And with the type, I'm going to pick binary because we want to apply this on the CSV files that are saved as binary in this query. So I'll pick binary. Default value, I'm going to pixels 2. So now it has been able to identify this binary query here. So that's what is going to be the default value. With the current value, we are still going to maintain this. So here, the only thing we are going to change is make sure that here we pick binary. And then the suggested values are also going to be binary. So with this done, I'm going to click OK. So now we have our parameter here. Now, the next thing that we are going to do to this parameter is to create another query out of this, which is going to reference this. Then we can change that query into a CSV file, and then we can transform it. So I'm going to right click and pick reference. So now we have this here. Now here, we can click on the drop down. Sometimes this option doesn't work for me. So here, I'm going to click on this to be able to see the file. So I'll click on this, double click on this, and now this becomes the CSV file, which is going to be the sample file that I'm going to transform and apply the same transformation to similar data that we have here. So here, I'm just going to use the February one as a sample. And here I can do all the transformations that I want to apply to my data. So here, what I want to do is to fill down. You can see that here we have February, which is the month. But based on how the data is structured, we don't have anything here. So what I'm going to do first is to even promote the first row to become the column headers. So I'll click on the drop down here, use first row as the header. So now we have the month, the name, and then we have different regions that the company operates. So here we have the month, but there's nothing here. So we can fill down. But because we don't have, because we don't have anything here, when we decide to fill down, you wouldn't be able to fill down. So here when I pick fill and then fill down, you don't see anything here. So I'm going to do replace. So I'll right click and pick replace values. So all the blanks, I'm going to replace it with null. Then click OK. So now we have this here. So I can then right click and pick fill and then fill down. So these are the transformations that we want to apply. So based on the data that you are working with, there are a series of different transformations that you can apply. So that doesn't mean you have to go through the same process. It depends on the data that you are working with. So based on this data, that's how we want to transform it. So here we have the 4 months here. Now here you can see that we have the countries here. Now what we want to do is to bring these countries into one column, and then the values that you are seeing here, we also want to put it in another column. So you're going to have 2 columns out of this. This means that we need to unpivot these columns. So what I'm going to do is to select the month column and then select the name column. And I'm going to right click and pick unpivot other columns. So these are the other columns I want to unpivot. So unpivoting then means that I want to convert the columns into rows. So I'm going to pick unpivot columns. And now you see that we have the column headers into one row or one column. And then we have the values in another column. So I'm going to call this maybe region, let's say region, countries. And I'm going to bring in this as maybe sales. Now we have this here. Now, what I want to do is to convert this into decimals. So I'm going to click on this decimal number. Now this gives me an error. So here, let's reverse this. Now the reason why we are getting an error is because of the dollar sign. So what we are going to do is to find and replace the dollar signs. So I'm going to right click, replace values, and I'll pick dollar. And I'm not going to replace it with anything. So here I'm going to leave this blank and then click OK. So now we have this here. I can then convert this into a decimal number. So that's how I want to format my data. But here we have used this as a reference or as a sample. Now, because this query here is referencing this parameter, we can convert this into a custom function, which we can then apply to any data that we want to transform, going through the same steps that we have applied here. Now, remember, if you take a look at the original data, we have other months, but we don't want to do this one after the other. So we just use February as a sample. So here I'm going to call this sample file. We have this here. So I'm going to convert this into a custom function. So I'm going to right click, and here we have the option to create a function out of this query. Now, because this is referencing a parameter, it makes the work easier. So here I'm going to click on kit function. So what it's going to do is that it's going to wrap everything here into a function, which we can then apply to other data that we have. So I'll click on kit function. And here we need to provide a function name. But you notice something here, parameters, and here is using the source transform parameter that we have here. So here we can give it a function name. So here we are going to look at transform, or we are just going to say, let's say transform CSV, and click OK. Now this will create a function for us. And here you can see that it has its own group. So here you see the function, you see the sample file, and you see the parameter. So here the sample file is here. So what it means is that any transformation that we apply to this is going to be applied to the function. And any object that we are going to apply this function on is going to pick all the steps or all the transformations that we have applied to this query. So now let's go to our query that we have here, this query. I'm going to duplicate this again. So we have this here. So what I'm going to do is remove all the other columns. I'm going to leave just the content and then the name. So I'll select the two columns by holding down my shift key or control key and select the other column. I'm going to right click and say remove the other columns. Now I want to apply this transformation, this function here. We want to apply it on this, because now here, when I click on this, you see how the data is structured. The data is in its original state. The data is in its original state. Now it has not been transformed, but we have a function that will help us to transform this. So let me remove all the steps and then go back to the content. So I have this here. So now what I'm going to do is to invoke the function that we have created and apply it on this query, which is going to pick the content here, which is a binary, and then apply the transformations that we have applied to this sample file. So what I will do is to select this query. I'll go to add column. And here we have this option to invoke a custom function. So I'm going to click on this. And here we need to provide a name for the column. Here I'm not going to do anything. I'll say transformed query or transformed data. Here we need to select the function query that we want to use. So here we just have only one function, which is transform CSV. So I'm going to select this. And here it will ask for the source that we want to use. We want to apply this function on. So here it's going to be applied on the content, because the parameter that we created was a binary query or binary parameter. So this content has all the binary files. So I'm going to click on the drop down. You see that we have the name, which is this, and then the content. So we want to apply this on the content, which has the binary. So I'm going to hit OK. And now we have this here as a transformed table. So now when you click on it, you see how the data looks like. So you see that here we have the month, the name, the region, and the source, which is the same as the sample file. When I select this, you see the February. When you select this, you see the March. When you select this, you see the April, you see the May, and then you see the June. So here we have been able to transform all the queries here by reusing the function that we have created. So here, if I want to combine everything and then expand it, I can click on this. Or if I'm interested in individual file, I just click on this. This is going to expand and you'll be able to see the data here. So you can see that this is for January. Now let me go back to here. So now I want to combine everything after applying the transformation. So I'm going to click on this and you see all the columns that we have. I'm going to uncheck this option, use the original name as prefix, and then click OK. And now you see the transformed data here. So when you click on the drop down, you see that we have for all the months. Now with this transformed, if I go to the sample file, and because this is a function, any changes that I'm going to do to the sample file, this is also going to pick up the changes. Now let's do something small here. So here I want to aggregate this as much as I can. So maybe here, the analysis that we are going to do is going to be around the region and their total sales. So I want to be able to aggregate this. So I can group this by region and then sum the sales for each of the region. I'm not interested in the granularity of this data. I just want to aggregate this. So here on the transform, I'll go to group by. And I'm going to group this by region. And then the aggregation I'm going to add here is to sum the sales column. So I'll pick sum, and I'm summing the sales column. I can give it a name, total sales, or maybe total revenue. And click OK. Now this will aggregate this. Now let's go back to the transformed one. And if you take a look at this, you see that this also has the aggregation. And it means these columns are going to be blank. So we can remove all of them, and then you can see it here. So let's remove the other columns. So I'm going to remove this. And then remove the month and then the name. And now if you take a look at this, if you click on the drop down and maybe you pick February, you see the aggregate for February. So here we don't have anything here. Okay, let me pick January. This is not giving us the value. Let's go to the transformed. So we have this here. So what's the reason for this? Okay, let me go back to this steps. Okay, we don't have anything in there. Okay, no problem. Let's continue. So now let's leave this here. So let's go back to the sample file. I'm going to remove all the steps that I applied to this. So let's maintain it this way. If you have to fix this, it will take us some time. So I'm going to leave it as it is. So I'll come back to this and then expand on this. So now we have all the queries or all the binary files being transformed using this as a sample. So that's how you'll be able to use parameters to define or to create custom functions, which you can then use to automate your transformations within Power Query. Now, so all these is about query parameters. Now let's go to Power BI, and then we are going to look at the report parameters that we can also implement. So what I would do is to close this. I'm not going to apply the queries. So I'm going to discard the changes. So let me close this. So now let's look at how we can also use report or what if parameters. Sorry. Now let's look at how we can use report parameters. So here within Power BI, when it comes to modeling, is that we have new parameter. When you click on the drop down, we have two types. Initially, we used to have this numeric range. Now, just recently, we have a new parameter that we can apply, which is the first parameter. So let's look at how we can work with this. So within this report here, let's go to the decomposition tree. Now, if you take a look at this decomposition tree, we are looking at the breakdown of our total sales. So if you take a look at this report, let me remove this report 2. Now, within this decomposition tree, we are analyzing our total sales. So here we are using AI split to be able to find the highest values that are impacting our total sales. Now, if you take a look at this report, we have other measures that we can equally analyze. So here we want to make it easier for our users to pick the measure that they want to analyze in the decomposition tree. But here we don't want to create 3 different decomposition trees, but we want to give our users the option where they can select the measure that they want to analyze using this decomposition tree. And that's where we can create a field parameter, which is going to give us our users the option to select the measure or the metric that they want to analyze. So let me resize this. Now, I'm going to create a field parameter. So what I will do is to go to modeling, and I'll go to new parameter and click on fields. So here we already have the measures here. We have our total orders measure, total profit, and then the total sales. So here I'm going to create a parameter. So here I'm going to create a parameter which is going to have the options for our users to select either total sales, total profit, or total orders. So I'll click on this and say maybe metrics. Metrics. Oh, yeah, metrics. Okay. So now I have access to select any of the fields within my tables that I have. So here I'll go to sales table. So here I can pick individual fields or I can pick a measure. So here I'm going to pick my total orders measure, total profit, and then total sales. So these are the three measures I want to provide for my users to select from. So these are the three. And here we have this option to add slicer to this page. So if you check this option, it's going to create a slicer around these three measures where the users are going to select. So you're going to maintain this option checked and click Create. So now this has created a slicer for us, just like any of the slices that we have inserted ourselves. So if you take a look at the visualizations here, you see that we have slicer checked. Now here I'm going to do some formatting. So I'll go to the slicer setting, and with the orientation, I'm going to pick horizontal. And I'm going to bring this here. So let me resize this. I'm going to turn off the background. So I'll go to Effect and turn off the background. So we have this here. So I'm not going to apply any formatting to this. I'm just going to maintain this. So now a user can select total revenue, total profit, total sales, or total orders. But when you select, you don't see anything here. Now, when you create a field parameter, Power BI creates a calculated table for you. So if you take a look at this, we have the metrics here. So when you click on it and then you expand it, you see that we have this here. The same way, when you go to data view, you'll be able to see it here. So we have the metrics here, and then we have the metrics fields, and we have the metrics order. Now, let's go to the report view. So here, when you select this, you see that it has created a calculated column, and there's a calculated column that is being used here. So I'm not going to go into this. Now, to be able to have this apply to this visualization, what you need to do is to make use of this calculated column. And now, as a user picks any value from the slicer, whatever that you want to analyze is also going to change. So let's select this decomposition tree. And here we are analyzing total sales measure. I don't want to analyze this. I'm rather going to pick this, which is dynamic based on what the user is going to select. So I'm going to place it in the analyze wall bucket here. And now you see that this time is analyzing the total profit. So if I pick total orders, you see that this changes the whole thing. And now we are looking at total profit across these different dimensions. If I pick total sales, it changes. If I pick total profit, it changes. If I pick total orders, it also changes. So here, everything is dynamic. So a user will select whatever that he's interested in, and then it's going to have this being analyzed in the visual. So this can apply to any visualization, not just this decomposition tree. It could be any visualization. So let's go to a blank page. And here I'm going to create a very simple report. So I'll go to sales report, and I want to look at maybe account, customer type. And here I'm going to look at total sales. So you can bring in your total sales here. And now this is going to look at this total sales by customer type. If I want this to be dynamic, where I'm going to look at different measures, I can then use this here instead of using the measure. And now we have this here. So what I need to do is to bring in the slicer. So I can insert a slicer here. So here, if I pick total sales, you see that now it's showing the total sales. If I pick total profit, it's showing the total profit. If I pick total orders, it picks total profit. Now you would see something here that even the title of the visual is dynamic based on what you have selected. So look at this. This is total orders by customer type. If I pick total profit, it says total profit by customer type. If I pick total sales by customer type. So this is really powerful. Now, this doesn't only relate to measures. You can equally create different dimensions that you want to analyze a particular measure by. So for example, here, I can go to modeling, new parameter, and I'll go to fields. And here I'm going to pick or create a parameter around different dimensions. So here, maybe account manager or customer type, and then let's say product category. So I'm going to make this dimension. And I click OK. So now I have this here. I can even select this. So here, instead of using the customer type field, I can then use this dimension here. So now you can see that now it's analyzing everything. So now if I select account manager, if I select customer type, this is analyzing everything by customer type. If I pick product category, this is analyzing this by product category. And look at the title, it changes. If I pick customer type, it says total sales by customer type. If I pick account manager, it says total sales by account manager. If I want to look at profit, I can then pick profit. This changes. If I want to look at it by product category, I can also pick it here. So you can create a very dynamic report for your users so that they will be able to select the items that they are interested in using the field parameter. Now, the last parameter that we have is the what if or the numeric field. So here within the modeling, when you go to parameter, you see that we have this numeric range. You can also do numeric parameters where you'll be able to select values within a list. So here you want to look at different scenarios or you want to perform some what if analysis. So let me show you an example of this. So here I have this HR analytics dashboard. Now the company wants to increase salaries by a particular percentage. So for each of the percentages, they have given a range with the increment that they want to implement. So they want to look at the impact of this proposed increment across different percentages. So if you take a look at this, if they decide to increase salary by 10%, what will be the impact? They want to increase it by 15 or 25, what will be the impact of this? And you see everything from here. So they want to increase it by, let's say, 5%. What will be the impact? So here we have this dynamic text here, which is picking the value that is being selected. So here it says when we increase salary by 15%, this will increase the average salary from 46K to 48K. This will also increase the total salary by this margin. So based on whatever that you are going to select, you see the impact here. And you can also see the impact across the different job levels that we have here. So that's how you'll be able to use the numeric range. So let's see how we can create one within Power BI. So I'm going to the report that we are using here. So here we have our total revenue. So here the company has been approached by tax authorities that they are now going to apply some tax on our transaction, sales tax on our transaction. So the company wants to evaluate if they pay a tax of this particular percentage, what will be the impact on their total profit. So here they have a range that they are looking at or they're anticipating they're going to pay. So they want to look at these taxes. If they decide to pay maybe 20%, what will be the impact on the revenue? We can do all these things using what if parameters. So let's see how we can do this. So what I will do is to go to modeling, new parameter, and I'll pick numeric range. So here you can give it a new name. So you can say proposed tax. Here we can select the data type. So here we want to make it decimal. So you need to provide a minimum and the maximum. So the minimum is going to be 0. You won't pay tax. Or maximum, let's say, based on the tax regime that we are working with, it's not possible we pay above 30%. So let's make it 0.3. And then when you use a slicer, because you are going to change everything using a slicer. So when you drag your slicer, at what rate do you want to increase the value? So maybe you want to increase it by 0.05. We can also set the default value. So you can make it 1. And then here, we also have the same option here, which we can use to add a slicer directly. So I'm going to hit on Kit. So we have the slicer here. So user can just scroll through this or just drag it, and you see that a value appears here. Now, another thing that you see is that a new calculated table will also be created for you. And now when you expand this, you see that we have two items. We have a measure and we have a calculated column. So when you select the measure, you see that here, there's the function that we are using, selected value, which is going to pick whatever a user has selected from the slicer. So if I use this on a card, you see that now the value is 0.1. And now if I change this, you see that this will also be changing. So this is to pick the value that a user has selected from the slicer. Now, when you go to data view, you also be able to see it here. And you can see that here we are creating a calculated column or a calculated table with just one field, which is generating series based on what we selected when we're creating the parameter. So here I can even select this and format this as a percentage. Here maybe 0 decimal places. So now when I come to my slicer, you see that now it's a percentage, not a decimal. Then we can also select the measure and also format this as a percentage. And now you see that here, even though we are selecting something, nothing happens. Nothing happens here. Now, unless we use this in creating a measure, that's when you'll be able to assess the impact. So let's look at this. Within our sales, we have this revenue measure. So we are going to apply the tax on the revenue. We are assuming that this is a sales tax revenue. So it's directly on the sales that you have made, not on the profits. So if this is about profits or corporate tax, then you have to hit it on the profit. So here we are going to hit it against our revenue. So here I need to create a measure which is going to pick what we are going to select, the scenario that we are going to select from the slicer. It's going to apply it on the revenue. So let's do this quickly. So I'll create a new measure. I'm going to call this tax. So first, we are going to look at tax payable. And this is going to be equal to our revenue. So we already have our revenue measure. So we are going to apply the tax on the revenue. So here you see that we have the total sales measure here. So I'm going to multiply this by the tax. So here we are going to bring in our tax, which is the proposed tax measure, which is the selected value. So this is going to pick the tax that we are going to select from the slicer and apply it on the total sales. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to format this. So now, if I drag this onto my canvas here and put this on a card, so it means that if we are paying tax of 10%, this will be the tax that we are going to pay. I can change this 15. So if we decide to pay 15%, what will be the tax amount? If we decide to pay 30, what will be the tax amount? Or if the tax people come and say, okay, based on our sales, we have to pay 5%, then this will be the tax that we are going to pay. Now let's create a measure, another card with our total revenue or the total sales. So I'll put this on the card. So it means that this is our total sales right now. So this is our total sales. So it means that if you pay 5% of this, this will be the amount that we are going to pay. So when you select this, you'll be able to see here. Now, the next thing we want to do is to determine, okay, so after paying the tax, what will be our sales after tax? Then we can go ahead and then new measure. And here, we can just pick our total sales measure and then deduct the tax payable measure. Or we can create everything from scratch. So here, let's assume that we don't have the tax payable. So we want to create everything at once. Then it means we have to pick our total sales measure. And then we are going to deduct 1 minus the tax. We are going to apply. So if the tax is 10%, it means that we are going to, let's multiply this, not minus. So here we are going to make it 1 minus the proposed tax. If the tax is 10%, it means that our sales after tax is going to be 90% of the original sales. So that's what we have here. So I'm going to close this. So it means we are deducting the tax. So now we have selected 10. So it means we are deducted 10% from 1 or 100, which is going to give us 90. So we apply 90% on this. And this is going to be the sales after a tax of 10%. So I'm going to press enter and then format this. And now I can create another card with this new measure. So we have our sales after tax here. So I'm going to drag it here. And now this would be our sales after a tax of 10% has been applied on our transactions. So I'm going to change this to thousands. So this would be the total sales after a tax of 10%. If I make this 20%, now it means we are going to pay a tax of this, and this will be our total sales after a tax of 20% has been applied. So this, I can add it to my report to provide my users with the option to evaluate these different scenarios. So now if the firm want to plan for this, they can plan for this. So if you assume that the tax is 15%, we want to see the impact this is going to have on our total sales. So it means our total sales is going to be this after you have paid a tax of this. If we decide that, okay, this time the tax people said they're not going to charge us any tax again, then 0, then you see that the tax payable is going to be 0. And our sales after tax is going to be the same as our actual sales. So that's how you'll be able to apply Power BI parameters to improve your user experience and also control the amount of data that you import into Power BI. So here we looked at 2 types of parameters that we have. We have the query parameter and the report parameter. Within the report parameter, we have the numeric range and we have the fields, which will allow us to switch between different measures or dimensions that we want to show within a particular visual. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for this session. I think there are a lot of comments and applause. Okay, so there's a question. Okay. Maybe a speaker, so you could unmute your mouse and your mic and speak. Hello, welcome.
I'm not sure Raul knows that. Maybe his hand was up in error.
I think he had a network problem. He just got kicked out again from the exam.
Okay, but looking at the chat, I think some people have put some things in the chat.
No, it was just okay. Someone was asking where you can learn Power BI from scratch, and the other question was whether that was a card visual, the 0.05, which yes was a card visual.
It's been a very I was even really surprised that you're able to cover all the different parameters. You know, went from Power Query to the one in after Power Query, we went to with the what if analysis is the last one. What was even the second one? Whoa, I was following. But thanks a lot. So I guess maybe it's the time for him to ask the questions where we get to pick a winner, right?
Yes. Hello, Thomas.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of applause, awesome presentation, and yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So the question is the Power BI learning community is being brought to you by UrBizEdge and sponsored by Enterprise DNA. So at the end of every session, the speaker is to ask a question, and yeah, the session will be on YouTube. I would send the link. So you ask a question, and the first person to get the answer. So the answers will be written in the chat box, and the first person that you feel that the answer is close to what you want, or you just give a thumbs up emoji on the answer. It's some reaction actually on the answer. So those that want to answer the question should type in the answers on the chat box, and Thomas is going to give a reaction. So to the first correct answer.
Okay, so the question is this: we mentioned that we have two types of parameters. We have the query parameter and then the report parameter. Now, I explained that within the query parameter, there are two ways or two main scenarios where you can use a query parameter. I just want to know one of the conditions or one of the reasons why, or one of the importance parts of using query parameter. So I want to understand under what conditions would you use a query parameter? What are some of the uses of query parameter? I think this would be, that would be more understandable. What are the use cases of query parameter?
Okay, so please start typing your answers in the chat box. Unfortunately, I'm not qualified, but I remember very well. There was that part where it was showing us about the different fields and the different customer type, and then he was explaining. I don't want to give you answer. Okay. We're waiting for answers. I think maybe 2 people have attempted. To be nice to see more people attempt.
Okay, so there are more answers.
Thomas, you can please start looking through the answers you've put in the chat box. If there's one
Okay, sure.
you can just give.
So we are picking how many responses?
Just one.
Just one.
Yeah, that's one. So
Okay.
you can look through the persons that you feel.
1, 2,
That's
3,
one.
4. I've seen 4
Okay,
already.
so yeah, I'll pick Prince. So Prince said to limit the number, the amount of data, so to limit the number of data to be imported. So I'll pick this, and I think that was the first response, to limit the number of data to be imported. So we said that, yeah, we can use it as the source to limit the amount of data that we bring into Power BI. So here you don't need to bring everything into Power BI. If you know these are the specific data that you need, then you can do a parameter which is going to restrict the amount of data which is being imported into Power BI. So I'm going to pick for Prince.
Congratulations, Prince, and that's a clap for you. Just you need to email us. Let me see if I can put the email. So email us at webinar@UrBizEdge.com. This is for Prince. So please, nobody else should email us to claim your prize. How do I spell prize? Z. Okay. All right. So great. We will be waiting for your email. So any other questions? And really, it's a very loaded session, the second one was the field parameter, which is the one that I think it was last month they released the field parameter.
Yeah, just recently, yeah.
It's very interesting, give another dimension to its use. I think you're the only person I've seen try to use it on the what's that thing you use it on again? Thing that decomposition tree.
Yeah, decomposition. Okay.
Most other people use the table or the what's the other common one I've seen people use it on? So it's very nice to get to see another angle to it. So any questions before we let Thomas go have, the day? We've already taken 10 minutes beyond the usual.
Okay, so I only have one question. So I'm asking this question because somebody also asked similar questions. So the question will be for those that maybe want to get started in Power BI, like what part would you would you recommend or something?
Maybe
Yes.
we should even mix that with the two other questions. Like you can answer it with the two questions we were saying we were going to ask.
When you got
What
started,
about your journey into this space, and then your advice for anybody starting. So his own question fits into that part two, your advice to someone just starting out afresh.
Okay, great. So my journey started when I was a student at University of Cape Coast, Ghana. So that was level 100. I attended one Microsoft Excel bootcamp. And I saw before then I had taken some Excel courses back in SHS or senior high school. So when I went to that bootcamp, I was really blown away with some of the features and some of the things that you can do with Excel. So from there, my interest in Excel developed over time. So as I was studying, I was learning Excel alongside. And then I met somebody who works with Certiport. Certiport provides certification around Microsoft products. So I got somebody who works at Certiport, and the person gave me a scholarship to write Microsoft Office Specialist. That's when I first earned my Microsoft certification. So from there, my interest grew over time. So I started organizing Excel classes even whilst I was on campus. So I came from a business background, so I saw most applications of Excel in what I was learning in school. So that's how come I was able to really dig deeper into Excel. So I began learning Excel, and then along the line, Power BI came into the scene. So before Power BI came in, we used to have Power View within Excel. So that's when Power Query, Power Pivot, and the Power View, all of them were in Excel. So I looked at the interactivity at which you can filter your data. And these are some of the things that really kept me learning because of how those visualizations were. So along the line, Power BI came in. Then because I had a strong background in Excel, I was able to navigate into Power BI easily. Because before then, tutorials were not common like what you can find now. So because of the Excel background that I had, I was able to go through Power BI, and then looking at the interactivity, the interface, and the visuals, I was really enthused, and that got me going into Power BI. So with that knowledge, I was able to even migrate or pick up other skills in R and then Python. So somebody like I learned those things on my own based on the strong foundation that I had in Excel. So most of the time I tell people Excel is beyond a spreadsheet. Like if you know how to use Excel really well, trust me, there's no other programming or anything that you want to learn that you wouldn't be able to learn. Excel goes beyond just being a technical skill. It really improves your problem solving skills, your communication skills as well. Because when you're writing formulas or you're developing your Excel template, you need to think about end users, how you'll be able to make it easier for them. So Excel goes beyond just being a technical skill. So that's how my entire journey began. So from there, because I was also doing trainings for other people, that kept me going. Because in my first role, I wasn't really into analytics. But because I was training other people, that's why I was able to keep up learning up to this time, where I've been able to get a full-time role where I apply the skills that I have now. So my advice to someone who is getting started, especially those who come from non-technical background, like maybe social sciences or business, I would advise to start with Excel. Don't jump straight. Yes, you can jump straight into Power BI, but my advice for you is to get started with Excel. Because when you have strong Excel background, trust me, you'll be able to navigate into Power BI easily, and you'll be able to do really well, especially understanding some of the concepts. For example, if you take things like in Power BI, like DAX, We have evaluation contests like row contests. These things are also in Excel. So if you know how formulas, though they are a bit different, but if you know how functions or formulas work in Excel, you can easily navigate or use the same knowledge within Power BI, and this will go a long way to help in your journey. So I wouldn't advise you to jump straight into Power BI or Python. Most of the time, you see people who want to get started with data analytics, they go straight into Python. That's fine, especially those who come from tech background. But if you are from non-tech background, I would advise you to start from Excel. It will help you, though you can move into Python or Power BI directly or straight, but I'll advise you to start with Excel, especially if you are somebody who wants to learn on your own. You don't have anybody who is going to coach you, though there are online courses, but at some point you need somebody who is going to guide you, who is going to coach you. But if you don't have such people, start with Excel. Your knowledge in Excel will help you to transition into those other advanced platforms. So that would be my advice for those who want to get started. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that advice. So I've kept the links. The videos will be available by Wednesday, and we have an Excel community which you can also join. The link is also in the chat box, and you can connect with Thomas on LinkedIn or Twitter. And you should also check out Redman Up as well. So Thomas, thank you so much for accepting, and thank you for a wonderful session.
Thank you so much. Thank you to your entire team. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope to come back on this platform again. Thank you so much.
We'll be happy to have you
Happy
again.
to.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
So I think we can end the session at this point. Thanks to all the audience. Thanks to everyone who joined. And thanks once again to our special guest. So everyone, have a very wonderful week ahead. And this is where we end today's session. Thank you and bye-bye.